Well, hi there, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Real Estate Investing. I'm your host, Sharon Vornholt, and I'm so happy you're tuning in today. My guest today is Joe Mendoza. Joe is from San Diego. He's an investor. He's a real estate broker. He's a coach that has mentored and trained hundreds of people. He's also a frequent guest on TV, radio, podcasts, and he's been featured in many publications. So welcome to the show, Joe.
Thanks for having me, Sharon. Glad to be here.
Well, I love talking to people that are both investors and realtors, because that's sometimes a little bit tricky for people to navigate. But tell me, how did you get started? Did you start on the investor side or the realtor side?
Wow, great question. So I actually started hoping to be on the investor side when I was about 17 years old. So I was a senior in high school, and my uncle introduced me to real estate. And I went to a Robert Allen seminar, and I'm like, wow, I gotta be an investor.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it started.
Well, I know we talked a little bit before the show, so we're both Rich Dad, Poor Dad book people, and I tell people that book really changed my entire way of thinking. Did it do the same thing for you?
Oh, absolutely. It's one of these things that I read it and it stuck. And back in probably 2001 is when I read it the first time. And I pulled out 113,000 from my primary residence, and I parlayed it and made over $1 million in like less than 2 years.
Wow.
And I was fixing and flipping. I was speculating it a little bit. I bought a fourplex, and I did some syndication. I just made a run, and I turned that 113,000 into over $1 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And I know we talk about people, and I made this mistake in my first business. I looked up one day and realized while I was very successful, I had built myself a job, because I watched my parents. My dad was a contractor, and he ran the jobs, but at the end of the day, he still had a job. There was never a time when he could ever walk away from that business. So I like the concepts in the book, and this was totally not something I was going to start with, but let's talk about the concepts in the book, because I think it's important when you're thinking about building teams and things like that to understand where you fall in that quadrant.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
I'd love to. So cut me off whenever, because I get really passionate about this. So I'm going to warn you right now. So I ask people, how many times, or have you ever read the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad? And I whip it out when I'm like coaching them or whoever. And they said, yeah, I read the book. Then the next question I'll ask is I'll say, okay, tell me what the cash flow quadrant is. And they have this dumbfounded look. And I'm like, okay, let's review. So I bring it out and I say, hey, it's BIES. Tell me what that means. And they're still dumbfounded. And one of the things that I say is, okay, what are you? And they say, like, I'm a realtor, or I'm a fix and flipper. And then I start breaking it down. Then I say, okay, you had a day job, and that was your E as employee. And then you decided to get into fixing and flipping, or a realtor, and that moved you into the S quadrant, you're self-employed. And then I start to tell them, okay, I'll ask them, what's a common thing about the E and S versus the B and I? And then again, they have this dumbfounded look, and I go, okay, let me help you. When you're an employee, when you're a self-employed, you're trading time for dollars. Well, you only have 24 hours, so do I. And so you're very, very limited. And so the trouble with a lot of fix and flippers and realtors, yeah, they'll put in more time, they make more money, but that's not very, very scalable. Then I say, hey, okay, the BI, the business quadrant, the investor quadrant, what is the commonality with that one? And they dumbfounded look again. Okay, let me help you. The BI quadrant, the key word, guys, is leverage. And they're like, all of a sudden a light bulb goes off, because they kind of get leverage. I go, yeah, that makes it scalable, because if you remove yourself out of the equation and start automating it and get people to help you run it, game over. Then you just multiplied your efforts, because guys, I tell them, your most valuable asset is what? And Sharon, I'm sure you know,
Yeah.
time, right?
Your
And then
time.
they finally, that light bulb really starts glowing, right? So I tell them, hey, focus on the BI quadrant. Let me help you get out of the ES quadrant. And soon as they really, really get that, game over.
Yeah. It's amazing because I talk about this a lot too. When I grew up, we didn't talk about things like that. And I'm not even sure it was a concept. Surely some of the very wealthy understood it, but your average person did not have any concept of how that works. And nor was it taught in school. We're not taught any kind of business or financial intelligence in school. So it's not surprising that people don't know, but you said something interesting. And that is, when was the last time you read the book? Not have you ever read it? Have you read it again and again? Because you do get something out of it every single time you read that book, because you're at a different place in life.
Absolutely. And that's the same with Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill.
Oh, I love that book. Yeah.
I tell people you should read that book at least once a year because, like you just said, Sharon, your mind just starts to expand. And then you start to like, whoa, this is a brand new book. And then, yeah, absolutely. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I love that book. And the thing that I remember about that book is some years ago, I started a practice of meditation, mainly because I had insomnia. And in Napoleon Hill's book, he talks about going into a quiet room and sitting for answers. I have never forgotten that phrase about whatever your feelings are about that, but it's go someplace, get quiet, and think and wait for the answers to come to you. And that just blew my mind that all those years ago he knew to do that, and that was one of the reasons he was so successful.
Absolutely, Sharon. I'm so glad you brought that up because it's one of the hardest things in the world to do, because like a lot of people, they're so trained, you know, whether they're at their job or in the military, it's like whatever you are taught, programmed to do or expected to do, you're not trained to think. And so like, I love that you said that because man, when people really understand and get that, most successful people I know, meditation is part of their success formula, game over. Absolutely.
Yeah, and certainly if they don't have a formal practice, they have a way of going off by themselves. I know someone that goes and rents like a condo on the beach, and that week he sits there and he just kind of kicks back and he thinks, and he comes up with ideas, and it's the same principle however you do it. But if you talk to almost every high performer, they will tell you they have some sort of a meditation practice. That is a very interesting fact.
Absolutely. And like for some of the folks out there, I'll just say, you know, if you don't believe in meditating, well, and you're somewhat religious, prayer is considered meditation too. So it's like, as long as you have quiet time, when you sit by yourself and you dig deep and you really listen to that little voice, you know, where like it's telling you or sharing something with you like, hey, this is something you ought to try. Okay. And that's where the amazing growth really starts to happen.
Yeah, I completely believe that. I also think, and I know you're big on mindset too, and that's something I like to talk about a lot in my niche. It's really important. And today with everything going on in the world, and people are so downtrodden there, you see people over here going, okay, here's a problem, I'm going this way to solve it. And then the other people over here are going, oh gee, the world's coming to an end, I don't know what to do. So how do you bring those together and work on someone's mindset? They first have to fix their mindset around what's going on before they can even begin to work on what am I going to do next in my business.
Right. Well, one of my mantras or key things that I like to share with people is where there's adversity, there's opportunity, or turn lemons into lemonades. Because in every market, somebody's going to get really, really rich and somebody's just going to be stagnant or go the other direction. Just like the last market 2008, where there was a lot of people losing homes and what have you. And I tell them, hey, you've got a choice. Okay. You've got to make a decision. Are you going to be taking advantage of the opportunity, or are you going to be feeling so sorry for yourself and being a victim? So I let them try and be clear first that you have a choice right now. Every day is a new day. And then if you got so much noise and so much chaos, there's furlough, you just lost your job, just lost your car, you just lost your house. Well, you got to realize that, hey, that some of it has nothing to do with you. Okay. Everybody could start over as long as they're alive, because some people, like, they attach their Rolex or their car or that fancy house to define themselves. And quite frankly, Sharon, that crash, I did crash and burn like everybody else, but I rose through the ashes. And so I had to go through kind of the self-healing and quit feeling sorry for myself, and then boom, and I projected back up. So I had to really be clear with myself, like, hey, it wasn't you. Okay, you're the same guy, Joe. You can make it happen again. Get surrounded by really, really good people, read incredible books, and sharpen that axe, but take massive, massive action. Because it's one of those things, Sharon, when people just sit still, feel sorry for themselves, feel like a victim, that's when it gets worse and worse and worse. You know, Grant Cardone, you know, the 10X rule, I heard on one of his podcasts or something like that, he was talking about, like, he was a major drug addict. And what made it worse is when he had nothing to do, because his crazy thoughts just went in circles, and he did very destructible things. And so when somebody's in that mode, what I would say is, number one, realize you have a choice. Number two, take massive, massive action, even if it's like you don't know what you're doing, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Start moving forward. And then again, surround yourself with great people and read incredible books.
I think it was Darren Hardy. See, we're book people who wrote The Compound Effect. He used to be the editor of Success magazine. He said one time, he was talking about failure, and he said, you have to learn to have your pity party and get over it quicker, and then move forward. You know, you get to do that for maybe a day, and then, okay, it's time to move on. You can't live in that, because the longer you're in that spot, the harder it is to climb out. And 2008, boy, was that ever an example.
You know what I share some of my coaching clients or people I know or mentor. I go, hey, what's this? Right? I go like that. And they're like, what? So number one, it's for me as a coach, I say that's a pattern interrupt, because I make them stop feeling sorry for themselves. Then they think, right? I go, that's the smallest violin in the world. Whatever's happening with you, give it a 5-second funeral and move on.
I love that 5-second funeral. So you don't even give them a day, a 5-second funeral. I love that. I'm gonna steal that one.
Sure, go for it.
That's pretty funny. So I noticed you talk about the SWOT formula, and I love that. So rather than me trying to go into that, go over that with people, because I love that analogy.
All right, absolutely. So SWOT, what is that? So let's break it down first. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Okay. So strengths, you ask yourself, what am I good at, or what do people say I'm good at? That's your strength. Okay. Opportunities is what's going on in the market. And Sharon, you're a pro at this, you know, probates, right? So like one of these opportunities in this market today, whether you're a realtor or investor, probates is a huge, huge opportunity right now, guys. You got to look at, like, before, you know, what was the market before? There was REOs, there was short sales. We're actually moving potentially into that market again, but on the short sale, I wouldn't say that's an opportunity, because there's a lot of equity still, folks. So don't think short sales is like an immediate opportunity. All right. Weaknesses. What am I weak at? Well, weaknesses, guys, be true to yourself, because if you're not true to yourself and you're trying to do it all, you're trying to, like, okay, I could figure out this website, I could figure out my bookkeeping, etc., and you're not that good at it. Yeah, you could do it, but it takes longer than it normally would. Well, that's a weakness. I say delegate it, find somebody or hire somebody to help. And then threats, T. Well, what's a threat? Okay. Before it used to be a buyer's market, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a threat right now to agents and potential investors is there's not enough inventory. Well, that's a threat to your business, because if you don't think of it as a threat, how are you going to pay your bills? How are you going to do more fix and flips? So what you got to do is start sending maybe those yellow letters, do those campaigns, start farming again, start door knocking, start calling. Because if you don't do something about it, your competition will just hum right past you. Game over. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Guys, realize that's a very, very powerful formula, and really like be true to yourself, because if, especially on the weakness, if you don't see that, could make a bad 2008 all over again for some.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, when I was growing up, we were always taught to work on your weaknesses. You're a terrible ball player. So I was the catcher on a softball team, but I was never the star player. But it was like, just go out there and practice. You'll get better. You'll get better. Well, in business, that's not the smartest thing to do. So, but that's really what we were taught. You know, you got to master everything. You really don't. You need to master the things you're really good at. And I think that's what sets really the superstars in any business, certainly in real estate, apart from everybody else, is they know to say, I'm not very good at that. I'm going to get an acquisitions manager, or whatever it is. I hate marketing. I know I have to do marketing, so I'm going to get somebody to do that, rather than to just dread it, put it off. At the end of the month, it's not done. Or your bookkeeping. That's something I had to outsource, because I would look up after when I had gotten my extension on, and I was good till October. It'd be, okay, it's August. I haven't done any of this. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I finally had to go. I can do it. I'm actually pretty good at it, but I hate it. So rather than to try to make myself do all of these things, you will excel. It's my feeling anyway. You're going to excel in business if you stay in your lane, as Oprah says. Stay in your lane where your genius is. Do that.
Exactly. I mean, I could talk about Michael Jordan, right?
Oh
You know,
yeah.
you all know him as the greatest basketball player that ever lived, right? And then one day he decided, hey, let's give baseball a run, right?
Yeah.
And some of you that don't know, but yeah, he tried playing baseball,
Yeah.
and he actually got into a farm league, and he wasn't just a good baseball player. He was okay, but he was a great legend. And some of you never knew that because he never became a great baseball player. So yeah, I agree. Stay in your lane.
Yeah, same. That's another one of those things you remember, and it's very powerful to know where your strengths are, and then if you're going to build a business, then you hire for the rest. So I know we talked about this a little bit, but I think I want to really hammer home the fact that when the real estate market shifts, you have to change. You have to adapt. And, you know, people, I know older investors, way older than me, that say, I've made money when interest rates were 16, 17%, and I've made money when they're 2%, 3%, but I just did it differently. And I think that's what people have to think about this market. And you brought up about opportunity. There is always opportunity in adversity. So when people don't shift, you know as well as I do, bad things happen. We'll just say that bad things happen. So what do you have to add to that?
Oh man, from both sides of the equations, for realtors that might be listening to this, or investors that might be listening to this. You know, I know a lot of realtors, they were doing very, very well, and then they bought the big car, they bought the big house. And there's two books out there that I would highly recommend to read right now. Who Moved My Cheese?
Love that book.
And Shift by Gary Keller.
Yeah,
It'll bring things all into perspective, all right? Because if you're not totally always pivoting, adapting, and overcoming, you will get left behind.
Yeah.
Okay. And right now, I would say the opportunities for sure, probates. The other opportunities are baby boomers, you know, potentially millennials too, as the ones that are coming into the market to buy. And so like, you can't think that, hey, I'm going to keep doing what I did 3 months ago or 3 years ago, that is going to work now. No. And don't be fooled by this reality, guys, because just because the market's kind of getting good, you see interest rates are dropping, you know, don't be fooled what's around the corner. And being in real estate almost 3 decades, 3 cycles, I got to share with you this, like, what's kind of keeping the economy afloat right now are these 4 things, and you've got to be really, really aware about it. Number 1 is unemployment checks, is people are getting paid, right? The stimulus money, the PPP, and the SBA. People had a good amount of cash. I mean, some of my clients and friends had 100,000 plus of PPP money, 300,000 plus PPP money. Well, that's going to keep them afloat a while. Yeah. But like, you got to look at what's on the other side of that equation, right? 24-hour fitness, you know, reorganization, Hertz, supplantation went down. I mean, these people can't afford to stay open. Okay, who's going to pay that mortgage? Who's going to make that payment to the bank? Okay, so it kept them afloat for a little bit, but guess what? I mean, this is just temporary. So depending how you choose to look at it, the opportunity could either be an opportunity or a threat, depending how you look at it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, because you hit upon a good point. That money did keep people afloat for a time, but you look at gyms and restaurants and things that can only open at 25, 33% capacity. They can't begin to pay their bills on that. It's not a sustainable model. So then if they took the money, they're stuck with the debt, and then they're in for a big bunch of trouble.
Yeah, a huge awakening. You know, and so guys, prepare for it. So like, no need to be kind of judgmental, you know, listen to people who's been there before, you know, 2, 3 cycles, like myself. I've been through it. I've seen it. I've experienced, like I said, 2008, I'll be transparent, you know, I lost a lot. You know, I went from making millions of dollars, losing millions, but then again, I chose not to be a victim. Yes. This was the same Joe as before, and I started revamping, reading the books, getting around good people again, sharpening the axe, and then it stopped feeling sorry for myself, and I made a run, and I was able to, you know, buy some more properties again, get some more investments. I mean, today, Sharon, I kind of share this. I hope to not sound like I'm bragging, but man, there's a lot of opportunity even in the stock market. When I started to see things going on, I jumped on DocuSign, I jumped on Zoom, I threw some big money down, and I made like, you know, less on even the biotechs, I made like 130%. And I'm like, I was like, oh, is this going to keep riding? No, I better sell. And I still sold at like 90%, and I still made some money. I bought some more stocks right now and making even more money there. So guys, there's a lot of opportunity. You just got to be associated with the right people for sure.
So let's talk about another one of our favorite topics, and that's building teams. I've never talked to a single person that didn't struggle with building teams in the beginning. Everyone talks about how painful it was, myself included, trying to find the right person for the job. So you've got to have whatever you're looking for as far as skills, some level of skills. But I've come to know that you need culture and fit more than you. Obviously, they've got to be smart. They've got to be able to have the capacity to learn the job. But having the skills is not always the most important part of it.
I agree. So when you're building a team and you want to scale, I would say start with truth, okay? Start with taking a disc profile, because some people, they don't realize, like, they think there's this one person, right? They look at the mirror, they do things, and they think they're that kind of person. When they take the DISC personality profile test, then they find out they're actually this kind of person. And so I've got to say, start with who you are first, and then hire your opposite. Like for me, I'm a strong DI, right? Driver, influencer. And like the perfect person for me is usually an SC, right? And so I would say, you know what, find out who you are and then hire whoever you need to complement who you are. Because if two of you are one of the same, because when you're interviewing and trying to recruit and figure out like, oh my God, I like this guy.
He's just like me.
Exactly. Well, if two of you are one of the same, check this out. One of you is not needed, you know, because you're going to be like blind leading the blind, kind of like just because your buddy, you get along. No, that's not how you build a team. And what you talked about culture, like next I would probably say is, okay, after you figured out who you are, start to write down your core values, okay? Because that's how you create culture. You know, Bill Allen, you know, a friend we share, you know, we were speaking and he was talking about his culture. You know, you got to figure out, like, are you the party type? Are you the more reserved type? Because that's who you should be attracting. Because if you don't have somebody that'll fit your culture, your core values, your mold, there's going to be a lot of friction and chaos. And man, one time when I was just starting out my teams, I had one person who was turned into, unfortunately, like a cancer in the group, where her bad energy, her bad vibes really started to spread like a cancer and infected the rest of the group. And there went my team. So I had to start over because people were like starting to leave, you know? So I would just say, like, those are some of the key things to starting a great team.
Yeah, that's an important point. So had a friend one time, she was struggling, she was a real estate investor, struggling with building a team, and she hired her sister. And so she sends her sister to one of the events that I was holding, because this person had been previously. And we asked her sister, why are you there? And she said, because my sister made me come. True answer. So we all go to dinner and we're looking around for where she was. She'd gone off and found a party. That is a prime example of committed investor over here. I'm going to build my business, and nope, I'm going to a party. So yeah, obviously they broke up for a long period of time. Their values and they just weren't in alignment. So you start with the profile, then what do you look for next? Let's say, do you hire, it's always, you know, what type of person do you hire, but which position do you hire for, which is different for every business. You're back to stay in your lane. What do you need? Is that the way you view it? I'm going to hire for something I don't want to do or I'm not good at?
So great question. So it depends on the level of their business. If they already have existing team members, assistants, admins, or whatever, or they're just starting out. Okay, so that really depends. That question depends. So like for somebody just starting out, I believe in dividing and conquer, right? Find other people that will complement what you're up to, because that'll really help accelerate. If you're further along in your career or your team, well, you want to start duplicating yourself and getting out of the way, because going back to this equation, this formula here again, is if you're like a DI, a strong driver, a salesperson, you're really good people person on the phone or door knocking, and you're like in the latter part of your career, and your business is like, hey, you know what? I want to slowly exit, because I'm actually coaching people like that, like where they're looking at like 4 more years, 5 years, they want to pull the plug. Well, I'll say at that point, well, you got to duplicate yourself. Yeah. You know, Sir Richard Branson, Virgin Airlines, what have you. One of the things he mentioned was like, one of the first jobs that I figured out is whenever I start any company is I got to find out a way to fire myself first. Okay. And so in other words, he got out of his own way and he found his replacement. So like, depending where you are in your team building or your company building or your acquisition team building, it really, really depends how you kind of structure and scale it.
Yeah, and that letting go can be really hard, especially when you're trying to fire yourself, because let's face it, nobody's going to do it exactly like you do. Right. So we tend to hang on to things that prevent us from being a true business owner.
Absolutely. You know, and one of the other mantras or things that I share with people is done is better than perfect.
Yes.
Done is better than perfect,
Hmm.
because like if you're a perfectionist and you want it done just the way you want it to do, you know what? The kind of the mindset is like, you know what? I might as well just do it myself. You know,
Hmm.
that's limited thinking, and that's going to hold you back. It's like, remember, done is better than perfect. So you delegate it to somebody. It's not exactly how you want it, but it's done. Move on
Right.
to the next project, the next project, the next project.
So, do you have a system in place? I know you train agents, you coach investors, you do all of these different things. Do you have let's take the investor side of the business. Do you have like a system or a process, or is it strictly based on that individual?
So I have multiple systems. So
Mm-hmm.
again, it depends where they are in their business. So if there's somebody starting out, you know, I start with some of the basics. Like, okay, tell me about, you know, your mail. Okay, where's your target area? You know, and I suggest to buy a few different things like, you know, prop stream to get
Mm-hmm.
your leads, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then a mail system. Are you licking and sticking yourself? That's only going to go so far, you
Yeah.
know. Get
Right.
yellow letters, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, there's different systems depending on where they are in their
Mhm.
business. And so like fast forward to some of the other people that I'm coaching, you know, Asana or Podio is a great system, you know, to help like scale. And then, you know, outbound sales assistance, you know, Pat Live is a great system. So really depend on where they are, or sometimes a system I share with people. Okay, so what is a system? It's basically to take the thinking out of it. Okay, let's break it down even more to its simplest form. Okay, so system, what does system stand for? Save yourself time, energy, and money. Okay, save yourself time and energy and money. How do I do that? Okay, so instead of here, where it's always just in the solopreneur or self-employed person's
Mhm.
mind, I go, let's create a checklist so we could delegate it. Okay, so anything you do, from putting a mailer together to putting a farm list together or a target area, guys, break it down like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, 1, 2, 3. So it's not in here. And so when you first recruit your intern or acquisitions
Mhm.
assistant, it's not here. And like one of the things that I share, Sharon, whenever I recruit a VA, intern or an assistant or salesperson, I go, where's your notepad?
Mhm.
And then I say, okay, get your notepad. As I'm teaching, I want you writing down, because after you write it down, what I want you to do next is put it on a Google sheet and start typing away.
Mhm.
Because after you put it on your Google sheet, there's your policies and procedures, or that's your checklist.
Mhm.
Because I want you to make sure that a 9-year-old or a 16-year-old could do it, and then you could just pass it over to your replacement or the next person who you're going to help out. And that kind of gives them that buy-in, like, okay, I do need to be systematized. I do have to have checklists. Then I could share it and I could start scaling.
And you can put it off on them to create the system.
That's it. That's it. So I have like 3 VAs right now in the
Mhm.
Philippines, and that's exactly how I'm training them. I said, hey,
Mhm.
where's your notepad? And they start writing it down. Okay, after your shift, before you end, I want you to put it on a Google Sheet, and they start typing. And then quality control. So I
Mhm.
inspect what I expect. So I
Yes.
check it out. It's on a Google Sheet, so they share it. I can see that, okay, they're listening, they're taking good notes, and it's duplicatable. Because
Mhm.
if it's not duplicatable, it's not scalable.
Yeah. Sometimes what I do too is if it's a multi-step thing, like I always go back and use this example, which is really dated now, but back in the day when we used Craigslist ads, I had a VA in the Philippines. Well, she didn't know what Craigslist was. So I had to go, step one, go to Craigslist Louisville. And then I actually did a screenshot video where I talked her through each step of it, but it was a one-time thing. I mean, and they have such, you know about the pride of the people in the Philippines. They don't want to have to come back and say, look, I mucked this up. What did you say? So the ones I've used have always been very prideful people, and they love having something to refer to so they don't have to come back and ask you.
Absolutely. And that's a great strong point, like
Yeah.
Zoom. You know, what
Zoom.
I'll do is, hey, I'm going to record.
Yep.
This is for your records, my
Mm-hmm.
records, because this is accountability for me and you. So
Mm-hmm.
I also throw me into the equation. So I'm like owning it as well. And
Yeah.
so when they see, hey, he's got buy-in as well, now they see you're loyal, you're committed just as much as they are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I love that because I talked to an investor recently, and he told me we've talked over the years about the pain of building teams and how long it took to get where you were. And he said, I finally figured out what the problem was. And I said, what was that? And he said, me. I was giving them not enough direction. And he said, so my general rule now is for every task, every 5 minutes a task is going to take, I need to plan on 30 minutes of training. He said, I know that's a little bit of overkill, but he said it has completely eliminated my problems with training people. So it got me to assume the responsibility, because they can't possibly do a good job if I haven't trained them. And he said, I kind of expected them to be like me, jump in there and just learn it, and with the minimal instruction that I was giving him. And I said, well, I think we've all done that back before we had a clue about how to train a team. But he also said something which was interesting. He said now if he has something completely new that he's going to have to hire people for, he hires 3 VAs to do the same exact job. And he said out of that, I've got a keeper every time. Sometimes I have a keeper and a backup. And I thought, he said it's a minimal expense for one time, and it is invaluable in knowing who's really going to be a fit.
Absolutely. I mean, I had an assistant here locally that was like $25 an hour, right? And you could literally get like 3 or 4 people in the Philippines for that same amount of money, and you mitigate your risk and you multiply your efforts. So I'm a big believer in VAs, virtual assistants. I absolutely agree on virtual assistants.
So what's your go-to place for virtual assistants?
There's several. So I share with people, okay, if you want to do it yourself, DIY, you know, go to Online Jobs PH. You could go to Fiverr. You could go to Upwork, depending on the size of the job. If it's like, hey, you know what? I'm tired of that. I can't figure it out. I don't know how to pay. I don't know how to train. You know, there's Summit VA. You know, my buddy Stacy over there, the owner, he's great. I've referred a lot of people. As a matter of fact, if you say my name, you know, he'll probably give you a good discount or something like that. I used my Outdesk in the past.
My help desk?
Yeah, my MY Outdesk.
Out.
OUT. And I'll tell you what, Sharon, when I hired them, once as a agent investor, it more than paid for itself. So at the time, I think they were $1,200 a month full time. And I had this gal prospecting, you know, cold calling basically. And she lands within a month or so this listing. At the time, I wasn't an investor. I didn't know any better. I didn't know the opportunity. And I was able to take the listing and I doubled ended it. I had the cash buyer. I made like $20,000. So it more than paid for her cost of $1,200. You know, I 10x my return. The other time I recruited a VA in the Philippines because I was building a brokerage. I was building a company. Well, all that VA was doing for me was setting appointments as a broker. And then I would sit for coffee or lunch. And I got up to 50 agents in 1 year because all they did was set the appointments, teed them up. And I went in there for the close, and 50 agents later, boom. So that more than paid for itself as well.
Wow. So that is, I guess, leads us to, you kind of talked about that scaling. So once you've got your first couple of people, and maybe there's an in-between time when maybe you're not quite ready to take yourself out completely. So what does that look like? Do you have scale steps that you follow? Or, I mean, there's always the starting point with those first people, the fiver or the first VA, and then the opposite end of it is where you hire, you fire yourself. Is there a process that you follow kind of in the middle?
Great question, Sharon. So I've coached, trained, built so many teams and companies. And sometimes they get really, really successful and ambitious. And then unfortunately, here's the downside. They later crash and burn because a lot of these entrepreneurs, they don't have the skill set or the training. They've never been a manager.
Mm-hmm.
And so like the in between, actually, even before that, I would say the very, very first steps to include clarity is like, how big do I want to build the team? And one of the things that I would share is build the team to the size of your ambition. Okay. Because when I was at Prudential and I built my team, I got up to number 7 in all Southern California out of like 4,000 plus agents. And I figured out at one point I had 15 agents on my team. And I figured out like, hey, you know what? I was actually better at 5 agents because I had really good quality people.
Agents, yeah.
And pound for pound, I was stronger at 5 than 15. And so like, you want to be super, super clear on like how you want to build this team. What are your strengths, weaknesses? Because like, if you're not a very good like person that's like, what's that called? An enforcer. You're kind of like this good cop.
Yeah, the good cop.
You need somebody who might be a bad cop, who's kind of the enforcer, and like have them on your team. Because like I said, some people aren't good managers, trainers. They'll build a team. They're great at recruiting, but they're terrible at managing. So you want to be really, really clear how you build this team first, and then you start to scale and figure out. And then with also the outcome is like, am I going to be happy with 10 flips, 100 flips? Am I going to be happy with 10,000 passive or 100,000 passive? You know, because some people, they have this very, very lofty goal. I want to be a billionaire, you know, not even knowing what that really means when 30,000 months passive would suffice.
Yes.
You know, and so I would say like really start on clarity. Like, what do you want your lifestyle to be? How much are your real expenses?
Yeah.
Because, you know, you don't have to have the big fancy car, the Rolls Royce, that's like 5,000 a month. Yeah. You know, are you happy? I mean, my buddy, one of my best friends, Sharon, crazy story. He was flipping burgers, you know, Vietnamese immigrant, right? And then all of a sudden he owns 7 franchises. He's very, very content with Toyotas. He loves his Toyotas, and he's financially free. Okay. So like, just because you know, the big Rolls Royce and all that, like it's all cool, but what's probably more important, guys, lifestyle. What kind of lifestyle do you want at the end of all this? Because there's no sense working so hard and then realizing like, you know what, this isn't really what it was cut out to be. I don't want this. That's what I would start.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I was going to ask you what your biggest tip was you had for the listeners. That's it. Is you got to figure out what you want. And I had a gal in our RIA yesterday say, you know, they tell you you've got to have 50 or 100 houses. She said, I figured it out. I don't want that. I want freedom. And she did exactly that. I sat down. She said, I sat down and figured out my number. What is it I need? Looked at inflation and were, you know, rents likely to go up. Maybe one more house is my cushion house. She said, because I could always buy one more. But she said, that's not my dream. And I have to tell you, that was never my dream. You know, I love watching Bill Allen do his business and flipping 200 houses a year, but it was never my dream. And I so admire him and people that do that. But I think you have to know your dream.
Yeah, and also their profitability, because like some of these folks out there where they're a realtor or a flipper, they don't look at their P&Ls, their profit and losses, right? And so like they build this crazy acquisitions team, or they build this big real estate team. And I go, okay, show me your P&Ls. Oh, what's that? You know, it's like, well, do you
Yeah.
know your profit margin? Is it 10%,
Mhm.
30%? You know, and there's this one fellow that I was coaching one time, you know, he was making $500,000 a year, Sharon. Sounds like big money, right?
Mhm.
In some cases it is. And then when I said, okay, show me your numbers, guess how much he was spending to get there, Sharon?
A lot. 300. Oh my
$560,000.
word, he was in the. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I know people that are very successful that have big businesses, and that's their dream, and everybody should follow their dream. But I think you've got to get really clear, like you said, on what are your core values? What do you want your lifestyle to look like? And how much hassle and how many employees do you want? For me, that's like, oh, heck no, I don't want a bunch of employees. So you know yourself, and in real estate, there's no right or wrong way to really build your business. If you want big or small, or you get to make that choice.
I totally agree. You know, you got to get crystal clear,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because just because it seems all great, fine and dandy, person has that lifestyle, you don't know their P&Ls, you don't know their overhead, what they're going through. So don't let those things fool you, because once you're really crystal clear on yourself, once you're like prideful on whatever you have, like my buddy loves Toyotas, he's okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
People kind of judge him like a book, but don't realize he's financially free and a multi-millionaire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you find that a lot. So since I thought that was your biggest tip, did you have another final tip you'd like to share with the listeners?
You know, this is a great one, I think, especially relevant today.
Mm-hmm.
The moment you become fearless, life becomes limitless.
Wow.
The moment you become fearless, life becomes limitless. There's a lot of people really scared right now.
Mm-hmm.
I invite you guys to become fearless. You know, whatever it takes, if you're a believer or whatever, or you have a role model, start attaching to them. Start to like embrace them, really like regain that focus, that strength, because man, this too shall pass, folks. This too shall pass.
Mm-hmm. Well, Joe, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Thanks for asking, Sharon. So, in case you haven't noticed, guys that are watching or
Right
listening,
behind you. Is that the one?
that's the one. So go onto that website, put in your name, put in your email, and I'll send you some juicy tips and advice and what have you. And then if you really want to get in contact with me, I'll reply back, and then, you know, you'll see my email and what have you. And yeah, I'd love to get in contact. So thank you. Absolutely.
Well, and folks, he's the real deal. So if you have any questions, and he's always cheerful. I have to tell you that. I'm going to start calling him Cheerful Joe. So
Just one last thing on that.
yeah.
I used to wrestle, right, in high school.
Oh,
You know what my nickname was?
no.
Smiley.
Smiley. Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, but you are one of the most cheerful people I've ever met. So
Thank you.
and I say that in a good way. So,
Thank you.
well, thanks again, Joe. It was great catching up, and thanks to all the listeners who came out. And you take time out of your busy week to listen to the show, because I know there are a lot of podcasts out there. But please go over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. There's a link to do that right on the blog. It helps people to find our shows. So thanks, Joe. And to the listeners, I will see you all same time, same place next week. Have a great rest of your week, and bye for now.
Thank you so much, Sharon.